Dr. Matty Moss when he was young.
Hey, greetings. Greetings, communities. How's everyone? Good to see you all. It's been a while since I've been here on the Melanated Solutions stage, but I'm here tonight, and I want to welcome the family. It's good to see my brother and my sisters here, Miss Tiffany Bliss Brown. I'm here not only to participate and be a part of the conversation tonight, and to welcome you all to Melanated Solutions, to the Super Black. What is it, Kashama? Super Black?
This is the Super Black Election Breakdown.
Yeah, the Super Black Election Breakdown.
I hope y'all ready.
Yeah, I didn't sue them for using my Rosa Martin name for the show. But anyway, but I also wanted to formally introduce a panelist who will be joining us as long as she wants to, and until we kick her out, whatever comes first. But her name is Tiffany Bliss Brown. She also has her own brand. She is a brand. She has her own show called Everyone Loves Bliss. Everybody, pardon me, I'm sorry. Everybody Loves Bliss. And she may talk about that. That's her very successful podcast that she always does and that she puts into the world for us. She's a brilliant sister with a lot of thoughts and ideas and opinions, and that's why she's here with us. Welcome, Miss Bliss.
Thank you. I am honored to be here with you, brilliant gentlemen, to join the show for as long as you'll have me. And as the good doctor said, I am also the host and creator of Everybody Loves Bliss, which is a podcast. And we deal with a lot of the same issues that we're going to talk about here, along with doing one-on-one interviews with brilliant people like the good doctor, who is actually honored us on the show. And listen, I'm just glad to be here. I'm ready to get into it. Never mind about me. We'll talk more about me another time. Let's get into it. I'm ready. I'm psyched. Let's get it.
All right. Well, real quickly, I'll be quick, Kashama. We want to make sure that women's voices were equally involved in our discussions and as a norm, because, Black men don't know everything, and women know a lot about their perspectives more than we do. We want to make sure that voice was part of what we do on a consistent basis with the show. So again, thank you, Tiffany Bliss, for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Kashama.
All right, great. So as Dr. Cleo Monago said, we have Sister Bliss on here with us. I'm Kashama Sankofa. We have Brother Duke the Root down there in the bottom right corner. At least that's how he looks on my screen. And just to get a little bit of housekeeping out the way, we want to make sure that you catch us. You can watch us on YouTube, Melanated Solutions Media. You can also catch us on Facebook on our Melanated Solutions Media page. Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. And in addition to that, we will be opening up the discussion if you want to join us in person, on video. Just make sure that you are presentable. You're in a good place where you want the whole world to see you. We're going to put the link in the chat as soon as we open it up to the audience. So without further ado, let's get some of our family feedback from Brother Duke.
All right. So the last time we came to you all was October 23rd, and that discussion topic was, is Black TV too gay? And we had a lot of feedback from you all for that particular discussion. It kept going at least for I think an hour to 2 hours after we had got off live, before the new round of people came to rewatch things. So I just picked up a few gems here. We have from Brother Anwar Uhuru, who said that they just rewatched the entire episode on YouTube and it was a dope conversation. Shout out to you. From Alicia, and I think we should actually pick this up, guys. We have a new hashtag from our sister here. She just said, this is a refreshing perspective and helps me articulate so many nuances. Heart face, strong arm emoji, hashtag melanated. So that is our new language going forward.
Okay.
People, hashtag melanated. When you like something, when you hear something good. Thank you, Sister Alicia. From King David, the chef, Moore said that they think if real love was purely portrayed by heterosexual people, on TV, then heterosexual people could better understand the dynamics of a homosexual relationship. Shout out to that brother for commentary. And then leading into what we're going to be getting in today, most likely, brother Yemi Melendez said that Black people battling one another over which white master may consider us is crazy. And so that is the commentary for our previous session. Again, any comments that you leave on our particular platforms, YouTube or Facebook, and we heavily encourage YouTube, you can be selected to be shout out. And during family feedback, we take the good, the bad, and the ugly. But with that in mind, Adam, if you could roll clip current events. All right.
Right. So, first story on there is Kyle Rittenhouse, who was the terrorist who shot a couple people up in Kenosha, Wisconsin, during protests. His mother drove him up there with his automatic, weapon, and he shot people. But his lawyers wanted his trial to be moved from Kenosha, feeling like he wouldn't get a fair trial there, and it was denied. So that's all.
I think for me, I haven't followed this story nearly as much, because even though he was clearly participating in racial violence and there to be an antagonist and Trump supporting and back the blue and blah, 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 his two victims happen to be white males. So I have no fear that this particular incident is going to be held accountable. It's going to be he's going to go to jail. He's going to be dealt with in a way that our community has been begging for these particular types of incidents to be dealt with. So, Kyle, we'll see you in 10 to 12 years when you get out of prison.
Well, that's that. Now, this story comes from my neck of the woods, right? I tell people I'm from Orlando, but I rep because I'm from Sanford, Florida, which is in Seminole County, Florida. And in Longwood, Florida, at a Winn-Dixie, a MAGA supporter was slapped. They say somebody slapped the taste out of his mouth because he wasn't wearing a mask.
Well, now.
And I'm gonna be real with you. Being down here in Florida, I can feel the frustration because there's a lot of COVID idiots down here that don't feel like they should wear a mask and they want to get all 2 and 3 feet up on you and stuff. And I definitely have felt like slapping a couple people. What do y'all think about this?
Well, I don't know if anyone else has heard about it, but I believe it's Mississippi where they have just stated that more white people are being diagnosed with COVID as opposed to the Black populations, which is a big deal because we know that Black populations has been the face of COVID deaths in this particular country. And so with this going on, the government is looking into it. The mayors are saying that this is because of the different attitude shifts between white and Black communities on whether or not to wear a face mask. And granted, not everyone is wearing a face mask every single time when it's, when you should be doing it. But now it seems like the attitude shift of white Americans not wearing it at all is impacting their community.
I don't think there was a shift, honestly, dude. Like, I used to notice this even before the pandemic. And because I'm a hypersensitive pro-Black person, I look at the world around me and I take things in with a critical lens. But there is a feeling of non-compliance in white people. Like, I remember walking down the street in Baltimore, like right down the street from the Amasi Center, there was an area that was blocked off with yellow tape, right? Not the area in front of the Amasi Center, but a little down the street. And I remember seeing this white guy he just walked casually, just like bloop, bloop, hopped over it and was just walking like the tape didn't exist. And me as a Black man, like, I have a knee-jerk reaction to rules and regulations, right? I know to pick and choose what rules I want to break, and I won't break a rule just all willy-nilly like that. I have to be intentional about it to make sure that I won't lose my life as a result of it. But I mean, I think this attitude is something that they've had just as a result of being white. I'm white and I say so. Don't tell me what to do. If I don't feel like wearing a mask, if it gets hot, if I get uncomfortable, if anything works against what I want, then you don't have a right to force me to do it. I think that's the attitude. And it's coming back to bite them.
I think a good example of that, and this was documented, everybody saw it, was the first people to straight up resist the social distancing recommendations of groups of white people across the country who said, I'm not doing that. And I believe that many of them joined some of the so-called Black Lives Matters events for a reason to get on out there and to disassociate from being murderers, like the people that killed George Floyd. And it was a disassociation tactic as opposed to a transformation and we about Black people's life and justice tactic. But we want to hear from you, Bliss. We're going to story number 3.
I mean, this is a white on white crime, isn't it? It's the mask on was white. The person that slapped him was white. I don't really have a comment about that because I mean, okay, they let them handle each other in terms of this whole thing. I mean, I certainly, I'm going to be very honest. I don't feel like wearing the mask half the time. I wear it in public. Because here's the deal. I don't really know how COVID is transferred. I'm not going to get into all of that, but I wear it in public. I'm not wearing it just because of rules and regulations. I'm wearing because I think it's a safety measure that I need to take. I appreciate that they're handling each other because I see it all the time. Like you said, Duke, you go in a store and somebody's not wearing a mask and then you go to the manager. They don't want to deal with it. Well, somebody dealt with it. So I don't really have much to say about it, to be quite honest.
Mm-hmm.
White on white crime.
I hear you with that. Peace and love, Brother Bongani. So I know, well, this is the Super Black election breakdown. And before we get quite into the discussion, there's a lot going on with the election. Some people naively thought that, we would have election day on Tuesday, everybody cast their vote, a winner will be declared, and we all go home and la 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 la, like every other normal election, and that hasn't happened. So far, Biden has 253 electoral votes. That is the official number, even though some sources will place him at 264. And Trump has 214. They are currently fighting over certain battleground states, Pennsylvania, Georgia, to be specific. Nevada's in there too, even though they don't have as many. They don't matter as much. But there's a lot going on as far as votes being counted. Trump is telling certain states not to stop counting. He's also threatening lawsuits. This
without evidence. That's the favorite part.
Well, hey, look, let's get into that. I'm just giving the update. I'm just letting you know where we are right now. He's threatening lawsuits, and many people do not see a clear path to U.S. democracy being salvaged and actually having a president from this whole situation. So I don't know what y'all think about it or what's y'all perspective. Cleo, you looking, your eyes is going up into the corner somewhere like you got a thought.
I hadn't heard that perspective that you just mentioned about people thinking something about democracy. At the risk of sounding radical, the United States has never been a democracy. It's been a white supremacy, not a democracy. It's not a democracy if everybody keeps being white or half white. That's a whole nother conversation. But no, Biden's going to win. And Trump is a big baby. He's a big white supremacist, evil orange baby. And when he don't get his way, he has fits. And I think you all know, one of the few things I did pay attention to was when I saw a little bit of Biden coming out to say something. And of course, Trump came out later to upstage Biden. But what he said was ridiculous. And it was like, I'm taking this. He don't understand math. He knows how to work toward white supremacy being sustained, but he's not a particularly intelligent man. He's probably rich because of his father or something, because he's not the smartest dude.
Well, he did lose his money twice. He had claimed bankruptcy twice and had to get it back. So he's clearly a networker as opposed to a money raiser. But that was also brought up during this campaign as well. Like, he's not fiscally responsible. It's just more so the people that he knows.
Whatever he's the former president. That's what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he was going to do this. So I don't know why anyone is surprised by what is happening. He already said what he was going to do. I think that what is surprising for some people is that the numbers are close. I'm not surprised by that. I knew this race was going to be this close. It is a reflection of this country that we live in. So, and I know we're getting ready to get into who voted for who and how the numbers changed, but none of this is surprising to me. So
it didn't surprise me because I thought he was going to win. Honestly, what surprised me is that Biden did as good as he did, and that people came through for him. But I think another thing that's very concerning is that, well, not to me, it doesn't concern me. It just interests and entertains me. But this country doesn't really have a precedence or a real way of dealing with a president who refuses to concede. I mean, a lot of us are saying, well, he's going to lose and he has to leave. But then again, who's going to have a real physical fight or gunfight or whatever in the White House to make him leave? And I think that's what everybody's trying to avoid. Honestly, I think that's the reason why the election hasn't been called for Biden yet, because then you have to get into the question of somebody's not giving up the ghost.
Well, Inauguration Day isn't until January 20th, 2021. So we got a long road still between then and now, as far as what changes in policies or lack thereof that Trump plans to initiate in regards to his current presidency. So it's just something for people to think about. I don't know. I'm not going to speak out of turn here. I don't know anything about how they plan to manage that, but I'm pretty sure they had some checks and balances or how a president is supposed to get out of.
They don't do. They don't do.
People keep talking about Trump, but it's important to remember that Trump is part of a system. He's not by himself. There's Pence. Right. Matter of fact, the commentary that I saw Trump make that made no sense, Pence came back and more smoothly made sense about the logic of how this rolls out. And there's other people around Trump who are going to make it not about Trump, who are going to look at the big picture and give him some marching orders based on their bigger agenda. But I want to say something else before we leave, inspired by what you said, Kashama, about expecting Trump to win. I don't know if you all took the time to watch the commentary that I did on this whole thing that a lot of people did see, but I think it's important to understand that COVID-19 and the economic downturn had even white supremacists or people or white supremacy delusion of suffering. They suffered. Also, it's one thing for Donald Trump to be a theory of what he claims he's going to do, and 4 years in the aftermath, what he didn't do. So there were some white people who like him philosophically, who didn't like him presidentially, who supported him not becoming the president anymore because they broke and in parts of this country where he did nothing to resurrect their lives as he said they were going to do. And COVID-19, I believe that if COVID-19 didn't occur, which resulted in an economic downfall, he would have won again.
Well, let's be clear. The white population still voted overwhelmingly for Trump, white women especially. So even with all of that, that didn't move the needle that much away from him for white folks. They still have aligned with the Republican conservative idea, and Trump being that for them. So,
but there's still the numeric majority. And some of those white folks who voted for him then didn't vote for him this time. A lot of white people did, of course, but a lot of white people voted for Biden too.
Okay.
But Biden needed white folks to win, which is why, in my opinion, he appointed, out of all his potential vice presidential choices, the whitest of them all, not necessarily simply her culture, but her home and her family, and who the new first lady is going to be. The new first lady is going to be a white man. And so he was getting $3 for $1 by getting Kamala that nobody else could represent in terms of a white agenda. As far as I'm concerned, Biden is just as white as the rest of them.
Well, it's funny because I think that the reason why the Trump numbers went up is because white women voted against Kamala. I don't think I never got the feeling that white women were going to support Kamala. I didn't think that they were she was the candidate that they wanted. I think that idea it was really out of line. Kamala doesn't appeal to white women. If you've had conversations or listened to white women talk, they weren't going to vote for her.
Do you know who Karen Bass is?
I don't.
Okay, Karen Bass is one of the leaders in the Congressional Black Caucus, who was supposedly on the list of other Black women who are being considered once Biden was forced into having to do that. Trust me, out of all those women, looking at Karen Bass, who's a sister with a short afro, who comes off particularly Black and who articulates Black issues, which Kamala almost never does. She looks like a Barbie doll, a white Barbie doll, in contrast to the other Black men. And even philosophically, they not all married the white men, etc. So she did, whether all whites liked her or not, given the force of Biden's hand to have to pick somebody, not to look racist and keep those Black voices, he picked the whiteness among the Black women that were in his options.
Seemingly, yeah, I get it.
And that was a good strategy for Biden.
Well, speaking of, I guess, gender, because we're talking about women, and Biden did, he did kind of put it out, he put it out there before he even announced who his VP was, that it was going to be a woman. Well, some people said a woman of color, or whatever that means. And the reason for that is because there was a lot of discussion around gender this political season, particularly in our community. Gender was used as a wedge issue. And I mean, what do y'all think about that? Because there was a lot that went down for us to talk about.
Well, I mean, do we want to pull up the stats first or the philosophical part? Like, what do we want? Where we want to start with this? Because I got the stats right here.
For one, black men this season voted for Trump at 18%. 18% of Black male voters. I'll say that much.
Yeah.
You have to break this down because you just go to shoot numbers at people. They're not used to breaking down statistics.
So let me try to.
Who decided to get up that morning or mail in or whatever, who actually voted, 18% of them voted for Trump. And that has went up from 2016 and that has went up from 2012.
From 13% in the last election.
Right. So the stats that I have here, and this is really important because a lot of the people reporting on this happen to say just 20% of Black men voted for Trump. They're rounding up from the 18%. And it's not a totality. Again, we're talking about the Black men who decided to vote, right? And so what we're looking at for the stats, when you look at Black women and Black men, as far as this particular election year, we have 17% of the Black men who voted. I'm sorry, this is probably old now. I think it's at 18 now. 17% of the Black men who voted happened to vote for Trump this particular election year. And that goes up from the 13% that was in 2016 who voted for Trump.
Right.
So that is an increase of about 4% for Black men voting for Trump. Alternatively, for Black women,
It doubled for Black women.
Yes, it doubled, just straight up doubled. So for Black women, it was 4% of the Black women who voted in 2016 voted for Trump. And then this year, it was 8%. And so the way this is the key thing about how people can play with numbers and really start crafting their own narrative. Both groups of people happen to increase by 4%. However, if you were malicious, you could say that Black women increased by 100% of the last election year's particular season. So similar things are happening to Black men in this particular regard. And it's just so easy to craft this narrative that Black men ain't anything, right? And so when we look at the numbers, 81% of Black men voted for Biden this year, and I believe it was 91% who voted for 91% of Black women who voted for Biden. When you look at the numbers about Black women and Black men who showed up to vote, guess how many was that percent? Y'all ready? 12% of the Black community voted this election year. Guess how many was the percentage of Black Americans in America? 13%. So of that 13%, is estimated that 12% showed up to vote or whatever else in this particular election year. So it's just different things to consider. And the numbers are still rolling in because of that particular 12%, it could be damn near the entire Black community. And then the 1% that's missing is the constantly incarcerated, the ones who decided not to vote, and so things like that, and the ones dealing with felonies. So there's just so many different ways to play with numbers and craft a narrative of maliciousness. But it's just some things for us to worry about.
The anti-Black the anti-black male agenda and campaign, including a congresswoman that you all are going to be mentioning at some point, stop mentioning the women who voted for Trump.
Right.
And they're not doing a grand universal hating of black women who voted for Trump, which did double in numbers and percentages this time. So that's interesting how people keep falling for that anti-black male mantra throughout this culture.
Now,
and
this is part.
Well, no, I just want to say what I find interesting though is that I mean, y'all are right for staying on the path that you're staying on as far as the numbers and making sure that people understand what statistics and numbers mean and how they're being broken down. But it takes me back to the interview that Roland Martin did with Ice Cube, whereas he said that the Republicans, their goal was to get 20% of the black male vote, and that's what they believed that they could get. And Ice Cube asked a very important question. He said, well, why shouldn't that be covered by the Democrats? What are they hammering on? What are they counting on, like using as the loophole to get into the black vote? But you were about to say something in regards to that too, though.
So what I really wanted to point out is that when we look at the demographics of white women, black men, black women, Latino men, Latino women, and other, each one of these categories increased as far as voting for Donald Trump compared to the last election year. So what's interesting is that white men were the only group to downsize. They went from, in 2016, 62% of their voters, 62% of their voters voting for Trump, down to 57%. Now, this is the part that may be conspiracy, but it's just something that I got put out there just because I don't be trusting information. Their decrease is almost the exact same amount of the increase that black men went up this particular election year. And with everything going on with white people pretending to be black people, I just don't know when it comes to things going on in our election years.
That 4% is across the board because supposedly the number for white women went up 4%. So it's 4% for everybody. That's a very convenient number. Maybe I need to play the lottery because it's 444 across the board. So even with Latino men, wasn't it a 4% increase?
Let me look at it. And mind you, I think this particular chart is a little dated. So this one marks at 3%. I think by this particular time after the mail-in votes, it's probably at 4% now. Because this was done just from the exit polls from people inside of that went on election day. So
I think it makes sense with white men being having the most to lose, and everybody, and well, black people especially having the least amount to lose. As Trump said, what do you have to lose? It was brought up by someone else, and I can't remember who it was, who was saying when black people call themselves conservative, like, well, what do you have to conserve? What do you like? Make it make sense. I think white men kind of saw the bigger picture of so-called U.S. democracy or so-called U.S. Legitimacy being endangered by Trump. And I think they see the bigger picture more so than anybody else because everybody else is just desperate.
I agree with that.
But
what you about to say, Chris?
I was just going to say, I'm looking at, I don't know which exit poll you're looking at, Duke, but with the New York Times exit poll, what they're saying too is that you got to keep it in terms of who the finances. So I would think that the white men that defected from the Trump and the Republicans were in a lower tax bracket because those 100,000 and up, they all voted for, or the majority of them voted for Trump. So it depends on what tax bracket you're in as well when it comes to white men. So we're talking about probably middle and lower class men based on this number were the ones who defected and went over to the Democratic Party for this vote. So there's a lot to measure with this. Money made a big difference for a lot of folks in terms of how they voted. White women, I think, voted in terms of power and conservatism. And I think, like I said, I still agree that they voted against Kamala, just like they voted against Hillary. They're never going to say that. You're never going to have a conversation where you see the people that follow you. So when you're looking, I know this is probably more for me, that if you look at your social media group, 5.5 out of every one of your white female friends, none of which said they voted, not in my line, said they voted for Trump, but they did. So they vote in line with power and money. And white men do too. So I would think that percentage that went down are in those lower bracket. Well, based on the exit polls, they're in the lower financial bracket.
There's another dynamic here which I have not heard talked about in the press, but I haven't watched everything, and that is a lot of people who voted for Biden and Kamala were voting against Trump, not for them.
Exactly.
And they don't. A lot of brothers do not like Kamala Harris, and a lot of Black people do not necessarily like Biden. Mm-hmm. And that part of this piece that's almost never talked about, acting like everybody loved Biden, and no, people were voting against.
Ironically, the people that are talking about that perspective is Trump supporters. Like that, if you happen to, I happen to scroll through Donald Trump's Twitter every now and then and see what people are repeating, and they talk about how there are people who are voting against Trump simply because they believe that he's the Antichrist, not because they are actually engaged in the political spheres and beliefs of the Democratic Party. So,
well, I would expect that to happen, Duke. I'm talking about the CNN, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Most of the Black talk, not talking about that phenomenon, because we don't want to look reactionary and flaky, even though our choices make us have to be reactionary and flaky, because they're not strong choices for Black people.
Well, so with that being said, I mean, there was a lot going on with Black men, Trump, blah, blah, blah. The blame Black men hashtag surfaced, especially after Jamil Hill made her tweet about Black men just wanting patriarchy. And
I used to like this woman.
There were accusations. There were accusations against Ice Cube that the contract with Black America was sexist or misogynist. It did not address Black women. And I guess, but Biden's plan I don't see where it addresses Black women either, but y'all can go ahead and you didn't see it either, Bliss?
I'm a Black woman.
Not only did Biden's plan not address Black women, it kept talking about Black man this and Black men that in all caps. And then it even said what Kamala and Biden are going to do for Black men, because they're pandering. They're pandering, being manipulative, and trying to deal with the conversation about men going over to Trump.
And when they weren't using those terms, they were using persons of color, which ain't got nothing to do with Black people necessarily, and minorities, which is always white women. So I as a Black woman, looking at both of those, I didn't see what we were talking about here. I didn't feel more comfort with what I saw with Biden's plan versus what I saw with Trump's plan. The other thing is, I remember Kamala's words, okay? Whatever is happening in that plan is about trickle down effect. It is not. Kamala said it out of her mouth. You ain't got to guess about it. She was not going to do anything that directly benefited Black people alone. Whatever is in that plan, the expectation is you're going to get the crumbs. It's going to trickle down to you. So I, any Black woman that felt some comfort and alignment with the Lift Every Voice and Sing plan.
You gotta lift your voice when you say it, Bliss. You can't go down until you gotta lift every voice.
Well, we have some words. We have actual wording from the Lift Every Voice plan. Adam, can you put up the first slide from that plan that does mention Black women? Says for equal pay, African American women earn 61 cents for every dollar earned by white men in 2017. This totals 23,000 blah 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 less in earnings in a year and 946,000 blah 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 less in a lifetime. The Obama-Biden administration protected more workers against retaliation for discussing wages and required employees to collect and report wage gaps to the federal government. As president, Biden will codify this into law and he'll make it easier, blah, 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 blah. Oh, and it goes down to say job-related reasons and increased penalties against companies that discriminate as called for in the Paycheck Fairness Act. And he'll hold companies accountable for increasing funding for investigators and enforcement actions. So that's basically talking about the Paycheck Fairness Act, which is not specific to Black women, but it's specific to women in general, which means that it protects white women, Asian women, LGBT women, humpback women, women with purple hair.
That's the other thing. It didn't close the gap. It acknowledged the gap. It protected you in discussions, in arbitration. It didn't close the gap. It meant you can complain about it without losing your job, basically is what it meant. So here we are 8 years later and we still don't have the money.
Even more trickery though, Bliss. Did you catch where it said Black women earn such and such less than white men? Like they didn't want to mention none of the other groups?
Right. Because they don't want to mention the gap between us and white women. So
like I always say, I think one of the reasons why Black people play sports better than anybody else, because we're always being played.
Right.
They're always playing us. So we internalize that and can play games better than anybody but anyway.
But what's the second slide we have, Adam, from that document? This is about criminal justice. Now, this
criminal justice system cannot be just unless we root out the racial, gender, and income-based disparities in the system. African-American mothers and fathers should feel confident that their children are safe walking the streets of America. And when a police officer, this feels real.
Keep going. It gets crazier.
And when a police officer pins on that shield and walks out the door, the officer's family should know that they'll come home at the end of the day. Additionally, women and children are uniquely impacted by the criminal justice system, and the system needs to address their unique needs. Ain't a damn bit of any solution-oriented anything in that statement.
Well, one is Black men
back to blue.
If Black men if 1 out of every 8 prisoners on the planet is a Black man in the U.S., then wouldn't it be safe to say that Black men are directly affected, and then that Black women and children are indirectly impacted as our wives, sisters, mothers, and like children? Come on, Bliss.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. Well, I'm sorry. In the language, why are we talking about the officer coming home when it's the Black man who doesn't come home?
It's ridiculous.
And Black men in the community. What is this conversation about? He put on his pen and his family is expected. He does come home. That's the problem. And there's 4 or 5 young Black men who don't. So that conversation, but Biden has already said he's really told you he's really not for police reform. This is the crime bill guy. He is not for police. He's not for defunding. He hasn't talked seriously about any reform. And we already know Kamala's record as the AG, or GA, whatever. What was her? What was
she? She was both.
She was both. Okay. So we already know her record. So what are we talking about here? What is it that the language is so clear? What's scary, all jokes aside, is what's scary is the language is clear and we still have this cognitive dissonance. We still don't want to know what I think.
That particular statement that I just read is very middle of the road. It's trying to appeal to both communities. And with that being said, I think it also shows and reflects why Biden is in the position he is in election polls. Very middle of the road. Like, he is leading, but when you look at how much he's leading by, it's like by 1 or 2%. Like, all of these states are like 50-50 for Biden, 50-50 for Trump. So when you have that kind of appeal going on, this is what he's dealing with. Now, luckily, this time is working out because Trump had a horrible 4 years in conjunction with this COVID pandemic that Cleo pointed out, which a lot of people are impacted by, not liking how Trump handled his policies during this time.
Well, since we're illuminating how Black men are being treated, let's talk about Ice Cube. I don't think we've got enough into that situation. I'm going to be quiet and speak later, but I just want to start off by saying it's really, really sad. It's tragically sad what happened to Ice Cube. It reminds me of what happened to Monique for different reasons, and to Kanye West. And I can break that down later if you like. But the bottom line is that there's 3 Black people, none of them who are perfect. I have to say that because people's unconscious assumptions about how people think, but who were trying to do something and got crickets or attacked. And now they're saying, I'm out. And if you guys will talk about some of the things I think is important about it, I'll say it myself. Let me shut up and let y'all address that. But what happened to Ice?
Well, I just want to point out that the last time we talked about this, we did make the link available for anyone inside of who happens to watch our streams to be able to read through his particular contract with Black America. And we would love if anyone has read that and we provided it, feel free to put any quotes in the particular links down below, because we realize that a lot of times when it comes to narratives like this, we're just going by what the media says or what social media says, as opposed to actually looking into what is being said. And so I wanted to point that out. And what I have to say, and I almost don't want to say it because for what I have to say happens to be about Black men in general in this particular time period. And I don't want to take this conversation away from Ice Cube. But what I will say is that Black men are not treated as equals in this election period. They are not treated as intelligent beings. They are not treated as they know what they're talking about. Even when it comes down to Maxine Waters, when we get to that particular thing, there's this huge rhetoric that it's like, you shouldn't talk because you don't know what you're talking about. And that happens a lot when Black men speak up, no matter what field it is now. You can be in sports, you can be in rap, you can be in politics. If you are a Black man speaking up, shut up. Like that is the narrative that I'm seeing a lot.
And that's in contrast to Black women rock, Black women magic, Black women vote, Black women, Black people breathe, Black women do all this stuff. And I'm not saying that's bad and that shouldn't happen. Frankly, I support that. But what bothers me, and I think is almost sociopathological, is mothers who have sons are ignoring their sons, and the people who don't have sons or are acting like Black men are bad, and it's really feeding into a larger white supremacist agenda against Black men, and they seem not to realize that they're doing it. And they're not using their magic moments to partner with Black men, which is really sad.
Well, when we were in the primaries, we were looking at, I don't know if you remember Simone Sanders' statement to, I think it was Luke from Two Live Crew, when he questioned Kamala's record. And basically her public statement to him was basically, you need to shut up. Black men need to shut up who had an opinion against Kamala Harris, as if Black people, specifically Black men, didn't have the right to question her record against her judicial record against Black men. Then you had this recently with a very well-respected Professor Brittany Cooper, who goes by Professor Crunk, on, and I'm getting ready to go somewhere.
Who's just a liar?
Bragger.
Well, with her eloquent rage, but she's a professor at Rutgers, which is scary to me because she's teaching the next generation. But she suggested that Black women whose men were voting for Trump Black women should stop sleeping with their men. And I'm going to say it so y'all don't get in trouble. Really, that is not her testimony. She really should have stayed out of that, because I don't think you should suggest something that you can't participate in. Ain't nobody. I'm going here. I'm sorry, Brittany Cooper. That is not your mission statement, and it shouldn't have been. But it's asinine anyway. And then she tried to say it was based in historical. There was some historical precedent. Historical precedent that Black women had done this before to control Black men in terms of when they were out of pocket, basically, in terms of how politically out of pocket. So the ridiculousness of all of this. And I've called my own sisters out for it. I can do it. Yeah, see, y'all will catch a little bit of hell. I'll catch it too, but for different reasons. My sisters have been ridiculous. My Black feminist identified sisters, I don't know what Kool-Aid they are drinking, but this narrative is pushed by the Black feminist group for some reason. Not all of them. So let me just get that. Not all of them, but a great majority of them are pushing this idea that Black men need to sit down and shut up, and that Black women have the hold on how we should move politically, using statements like, we've always done it this way, or when Black women, we've carried the torch when it's happened, and well, aren't we tired of this merry-go-round? That's the first question. If we've always done it this way and we still only have 0.5% of the wealth, then we are doing something wrong. That's the first thing. The second thing is there was a statement by the same Brittany Cooper that told Black people, well, Biden was the candidate that white people allowed us to have, so we've got to work with that. She asked that, don't believe me. I always tell people when I make statements, don't believe me, just Google it and find it for yourself. So that's the kind of thinking, that there is this merry-go-round, this way of doing things that we've always done that we should continue. And that in itself is insane. So we have a problem. We have a problem in this, and it comes from, unfortunately, from our sisters. Our sisters are problematic when it comes to how we treat Black men. And if y'all gonna go, let's get into if y'all gonna go into your Aunt Maxine, y'all, with her last.
Soga Upendo said, "Say it, Bliss." And
you can get over being a fool, and or you can. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I shouldn't. I'm just saying, Auntie Maxine on this one was a little off. Basically, Auntie Maxine just said that she was not going to forgive Black men, let's be specific, Black men that voted for Trump in this election. How ridiculous is that?
I know Maxine, and it wouldn't be surprising at all if what I'm getting ready to say is going to get back to her. It's likely we'll get back to her.
Okay.
But I know Maxine, I've known her for years. I know for a fact that she is a brilliant politician in her capacity to dance inside of the system and be all up in white supremacy in the Democratic Party and get certain things done, if you will. And I know about her track record of work for people, particularly Black people, even that was directly beneficial to my work for Black people in Los Angeles. So she's not a theory for me, I know her, but she's also a human. The reason I mention that is because the Black women are being played by white folks. The feminist movement is white, just like the LGBTQ movement is white, which also plays Black people. And there is no Black equivalent being allowed to have a voice in the narrative. So every time it comes to talk about women's respect and women's rights, it comes under that rubric of feminism, which is a white paradigm. And I mention that because when you listen to Brittany Cooper, you're hearing a white feminist, racist, anti-Black perspective. And something just happened recently that I don't know if you all caught. Kimberly Crenshaw, the woman who gets credit for the term intersectionality, she did a show. You can all find this, and the audience can find it.
She's the blame, huh?
She did a show on Black. Check it out. This shows you how crazy the feminist movement has made us. Check it out. And it's on, you can find it on YouTube and you can Google it. The show was on Black male Trump voters. And they had a panel of almost 6 people. And Crenshaw convened it, but she wasn't involved in the conversation. And it was almost 6 men. One was named Wade something, who was a LGBTQ identified former football player who's now a gay rights activist. There was another similar person, and the rest were self-identified Black male feminists. Now, what's really ridiculous about it, frankly, and unprincipled about this highfalutin conversation is that there were no men on the panel who supported Trump. So it was just a bashing session named under the rubric of talked about men who supported Trump, and all they could call them were sexist, anti-Kamala because they were misogynist. And I wrote in the chat before I went to go vomit and checked off of it that I support women. I have no problem with women leadership. I have no problem following women. I have no problem working in a so-called secondary position to a powerful bad system. No problem at all. And I am in disagreement with toxic past patriarchy and anything that dehumanizes women and makes women less than. And I don't like Kamala Harris. So what about me? I don't fit your analogy here. And I don't know if they saw what I said or not because I left. But my point is that the white gay community becomes a psychological trap that creates a whole bunch of self-satisfied people who feel good about themselves because they learn the lingo of these different paradigms, and they throw it at Black people and forget about Black experience or forget to humanize Black people. Because Black men who like Trump, and I know some of them, have a perspective. But it wasn't on that show, though the show was named after them. It was like having a show called Women's Rights and nothing but men on a damn panel. But this is the kind of crazy that they do.
So that's crazy. Now, what you saying?
Those conversations that have happened, every panel that I've seen have always been stacked the same way. There's a group that is anti-Trump, anti-Black men that voted for Trump, but never the men who voted for Trump. There's never a real discourse. It's a bashing session. That seems to be the way that works.
Well, now a low integrity way of doing things, by the way, people.
Mm-hmm. It very much is. But what I was about to say, because going back to Ice Cube, he kind of did the circuit of a lot of media, platforms and did a lot of interviews. And a lot of people were just kind of shutting him down and not listening to him. And next thing we know, Saturday Night Live did a skit for which Ice Cube had to promptly tweet out a response of F you. And he said, you reduce my work to greed or something like that. But I bring it back to Ice Cube because the main criticism of Ice Cube from a lot of black people were, why at this point? Why so late in the game? But I want to point out how black people were engaged in the fight for reparations, among many other tangible black, issues, long before the contract with Black America came, actually before Biden's Black Lift Every Voice plan. We had a reparations hearing. And it was basically a circus. It was like an insult to black people. And this was organized by the Democratic Party. It was a congressional hearing. And they gave us the likes of Coleman Hughes to testify before Congress when it came to reparations. And so I just have a couple clips for us to look at. And then we can talk about the likes of Coleman Hughes, Cardi B, Charlemagne, and all of the pandering and gaslighting and ridiculousness that was thrown at black people, before they got pissed off at us saying enough already, let's get serious. And Ice Cube popped up. So if you can start us with Coleman Hughes at the reparations hearing, and then go on into his subway soiree.
If we were to pay reparations today, we would only divide the country further, making it harder to build the political coalitions required to solve the problems facing black people today. We would insult many black Americans by putting a price on the suffering of their ancestors. And we would turn the relationship between black Americans and white Americans from a coalition into a transaction, from a union between citizens into a lawsuit between plaintiffs and defendants.
Wait 1 second. I don't know.
Wait.
What?
So were we able to get that though? The reparations hearing, Adam?
That was Coleman Hughes still. But what I just noticed, we're going to talk about the second clip. We're going to talk about that second clip. But in the first clip, when he was speaking on the behalf of why there shouldn't be reparations, I don't know if anyone saw the black man in the background who was shaking his head and then put his head in his hands and just started laughing like he could not control what was happening at that particular hearing. But Sean, you can explain what Coleman Hughes does in his offside when he's not protesting reparations. Coleman Hughes is doing what?
Well, okay, so not even protesting, when he's not being plucked from obscurity, right, by white agendas to undermine black people's fight for reparations. He is a SoundCloud rapper who makes videos, and this one particular music video showed him in his underwear in a New York subway, dancing around, sliding up and down a pole, and being a doggone clown. He's 22 years old, hasn't even found himself. Bliss, you brought up the fact that I think he identifies as Latino or something.
He identifies as, because I know very little about him, because when I saw that hearing 2 years ago, I thought, well, what are we doing here? He's 22, so maybe he's 24 now. He identifies as Puerto Rican, so why are you even discussing reparations? That's my question.
Language. He said they, black Americans, like he was very clear about saying he's not black.
Well,
okay, so he's got some magazine I've never read. So I don't have much to say about him because he's a non-factor to me.
Bliss, that was a rhetorical question you asked. Was it really? I mean, I'm just asking. That was a rhetorical question. You said why? Because people need to understand why. When you said why are we paying attention to him?
No, I get it. But I mean, anybody's watching him at the hearing. How do we? I don't mean no harm, but
it's part of the gaslighting, though, Bliss.
I get it.
When you listen to Cardi B, shouldn't anybody with common sense say, why the hell is Joseph Biden interviewing Cardi B? Why is this the first person he climbs out of the nursing home to interview is Cardi B, right? So it's like this is pointing out like all of these crazy characters they pull out of nowhere to talk about our very serious issues,
Lil Wayne, etc.
Lil Wayne.
I'm
Dredd,
careful. Wait a minute. I'm careful. I'm careful about that because that's the kind of dismissive language they try to use for Ice Cube. So I'm careful because I think people with those large platforms can do some good. Because that's the kind of language that folks, Cube ain't nothing but a rapper. He ain't ever been. So that's the kind of language that they use for him. So I'm real careful about how we do that because you dismiss Cardi,
I didn't dismiss Cardi off the strength of her being a rapper. I dismissed Cardi off the strength of black people just want equality. Black people want equality.
Okay,
that's what I dismissed her off.
Well, again,
Ice Cube came with.
He did, but here was the complaint though, or what people said is that my hand's all in the camera, is that he wasn't, Cube did have a hard time articulating sometimes in those interviews some of the key points.
Some people can't read though.
And so
the writing was on the wall.
A way to,
no, wait.
I'm sorry.
Wait.
They use that to dismiss him. So I'm careful about that because, truth be told, what they didn't get to is that and I'm going to shut up real quick. But the contract with Black America has been sitting there for months. I had been talking about it on my show for months. Nobody had anything to say about it until there was an answer to it. Because while that was going on, let me tell you what Biden and Kamala were doing, and I'm going to wrap this up, is that there had been a planned call between D.L. Hughley, Jeezy, who I don't really know much about, Snoop, and I can't remember the other one. So that I have been talking about for months. I'm sorry?
It was Killer Mike too, wasn't it?
Killer Mike, there you go.
Yeah.
So there was this planned call that was supposed to happen, but that contract with Black America sat there. It was available to read. I had posted it. Nobody said a word. And I kept questioning why all of these people with platforms had nothing to say about it. All these people that were talking about the vote Biden and Harris had nothing to say. And I'm talking about Black people, Black politicians, Black athletes, Black actors. They had nothing to say until now, all these political leaders. So yeah, I get what you're saying, but I mean, it's frustrating. It was a rhetorical question, good doctor, but it's frustrating because that's why I'm careful, because I know how people turn that narrative around. Like, Cube is, he ain't important. He couldn't he wasn't eloquent. He wasn't, but his contract was. But we don't read the contract.
And that's my thing. Like you either can read or you can't. Like, don't say nothing about nobody's word if you can't read. I'm from the deep South, and everybody know I got a real thick accent. I don't try to pretend and change my voice around, because you know why? I know I can read and write circles around anybody that criticized my speech. So I know what's important. The words are what's important. And if you didn't read that contract with Black America, you the dummy. The joke's on you.
Well, as a matter of fact, Biden clearly, which is why I said that Black people felt like they had a choice between devil light and devil heavy, because Biden is racist and has said some very dismissive, dehumanizing, anti-Black things with his own mouth, even in recent months, while running because he's so ignorant, while running for president. But what I want to mention was this show, again, my goal right now is to get us to realize, and the audience to realize, how brainwashed and how saturated white agendas are in our psyche, because we think because it comes out of a Black mouth that it's a Black agenda, and it's not. And Lil Wayne and B. Cardi, those kind of people, those people are people who have no real analysis that's affirming of Black people, which is why they get play without getting any criticism. You have Ice Cube, and you have Black people working for white folks saying crazy stuff like, well, why now? Which is really crazy, because both Trump and Biden didn't come up with what I call their fried chicken plans until later. They didn't talk about the fried chicken plan at the immediate debates that they were involved in, because they had no fried chicken plan yet. So we keep on finding excuses because we've been so brainwashed to have an anti-Black default. We default into an anti-Black criticism instead of looking at. First of all, nobody even looked at the particulars of Ice Cube's contract with Black America, which are powerful, which are way better than those fried chicken plans that Trump and what's his name came up with, and less ambiguous and with BS language and to make it sound like it's something when it's nothing. And Ice Cube, I hope I can get Ice Cube. If you hear this, brother, let's talk, man. Don't give up on black folks. I know your feelings are probably hurt because black people are brainwashing this country. You know yourself because you use the N-word really sends us into a tailspin of a low self-concept. We got to stop doing that, man. Because part of why black people were crazy enough and disoriented enough to look at you sideways for giving a damn is because we're trained that caring about caring around black people's anti-white, and we can't be doing that. Because what black people should have been doing is reviewing the Go Down Moses plan, whatever the hell that plan was, by
I've been duped and I've been scorned plan.
Right, and the platinum bling bling, which is what they were playing off, the bling bling that y'all black people love so much. Both of them were very, very offensive. And Ice Cube's plan with Contract of Black America was offensive at all, except for one petty bourgeois comment he made, which I won't get into because it's relevant compared to the larger picture. And he is a rich man. He did make a petty bourgeois comment, but the bottom line is I agree with it in that we have to stop acting powerless.
Now, if you want to join the conversation, y'all, the link has just been added into all of the chats, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube, and they're on both pages, on the Black Men's Exchange page, as well as the Melanated Solutions Media page on Facebook. If you want to join the conversation, go ahead and click the link and we'll bring you on. In the meantime, I don't want to quell the fire because I know we're on a roll. But another aspect of this electoral season that influenced a lot of black people was violence, genocide, and fear being driven as a result of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, those deaths that happened this year. A lot of us were told to get out and vote as a response. In addition to that, Trump's statements of telling the Proud Boys to stand back and stand by, as well as rumors of white militias, as well as the Michigan governor kidnapping plot. A lot of this played into black people's fears of 4 more years of Trump, as well as election day motivated violence. What are y'all thoughts on that? Did y'all believe any of the hype?
So on election day, I was actually out celebrating a friend's birthday. We went to go exercise. And we wound up going to a bar, and the bartender had stated that, they were nervous about what was going on. They were actually kind of nervous, like, asking us, were we nervous about, who was going to be the president? And I tell him, because he has to be a white man here in Baltimore, and I tell him, I was like, me and my friend, we've been black all our life. So, this ain't nothing new for us. But what was interesting is that as more of the people came along, because we were celebrating a book release and everything else, there was a black Trump supporter there, and there was a black cop there. And the black Trump supporter said that they were rooting for Trump, not because they agreed with his policies, but because they feared what would happen if Trump did not get his way. Right. So this was an interesting thing for me. That's I've never heard this particular perspective. He said that if Trump loses, then there is a good chance that the Proud Boys and whoever else, blah, 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 was going to retaliate. And he did not feel that his community was ready for such a big deal. Another thing that he brought up was just that he'd rather just get it over with, as far as like if Trump wins, then he can't run again, blah, 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 blah. And so I was dialoguing with him about how Trump is not the Antichrist. He is just one of many. But this is some of the lack of perspective that some of our community has. Now, as far as the black cop, what's interesting about him is he was rooting for Biden, but
makes sense, but go ahead.
Yeah, he was rooting for Biden. But his particular thought process about this election was that, it was really an either or kind of thing. He felt like his role would not be impacted no matter who won in this particular election. And I think that there are definitely black people who have been fear-monged, but as this Trump supporter showed me, is that it's on both sides. Like, you can either be for or against at this point because you just don't have a plan to protect yourself and to deal with what's going on. If you do not have agency or self-initiation processes and things like that, or some good sense, you're going to just be swayed to do anything that you want. Swayed to do anything that they want, rather. And it's really sad.
It's interesting you say that, dude. Real quick, when you say a plan, I noticed this, and I've said it to family and everything. When I talk about Black people withholding the vote and not supporting either Trump or Biden, a lot of them ask me, well, what's the plan? Well, what's your plan? Well, what's the plan? I'm like, well, damn, first thing is, let's stop looking to them for our plans. First thing, let's get on our own feet. But I think I saw you about to get in too, Bliss.
Well, I mean, my only point to that is that in terms of being fearful, I think that there are other factors that I'm considering. I'm considering that we are looking at large evictions getting ready to happen of folks across the country that are already happening. We thought there was a moratorium. There is not really. That language in that CDC moratorium is very thin.
Right.
We're looking at shutdowns happening. So I think when you add that on top of this kind of dissension with the election, I think that adds to the possibility of there being some kind of violence. Because here's one of the things that, watching some of these militia groups, and I'll be brief, is that they plan and they organize. So when you talk about some of these organizations, we can talk about Proud Boys, which depending on who, because there were a lot of them that came out that said that they're Black and brown people and they're part of the group and they're not
the
whatever.
two that got stabbed, one is Mexican or Cuban, the other one's the Black woman.
There you go. So when you talk about these white militia organizations that have been in existence for a while, they plan and they organize. And I pay more attention to the ones that have been around for a long time. They've been stocking up weapons. They've been stocking up food. And with this kind of dissension, when you talk about COVID, the economy, the possibility of evictions, that makes me a little more concerned than maybe if we were just talking about the election. So I'm paying a little more attention, and I'm doing some things that maybe in terms of being prepared to maybe stay home a little bit more that I wouldn't be doing, because this election is not over. Trump is going to go all the way in terms of that they allow him in terms of court. I don't know what psychologically is going to be happening with that, because I think we should have had stimulus money. I think there's some things that are going to affect that outside of just the election. So I don't know. I wouldn't be as not fearful, but I wouldn't be paying as much attention as I am now if those other factors weren't kind of playing in the background as well. So
I think you have the privilege of being quite a critical thinker, Bliss, because that's a very well-rounded perspective that you have when most people are reactive, to rumors and stuff like that. But while we wait for somebody to come in, I just want to drop this real quick too, because in case any of y'all were in doubt as to whether Trump has a chance at winning this election, it appears that there are angels from Africa, hallelujah, and South America. God today, as my sister Vicky Dilla says, God today. We got angels and principalities working. Adam, roll that clip.
Strike and 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 strike until you have victory. For every enemy that is aligned against you, let there be that we would strike the ground, for you will give us victory, God. I hear a sound of abundance of rain. I hear a sound of victory. I hear a sound of shouting and singing. I hear a sound of victory. I hear a sound of an abundance of rain. I hear a sound of victory. I hear a sound of an abundance of rain. I hear a sound of victory. The Lord says it is done. The Lord says it is done. The Lord says it is done. For I hear victory, 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 victory in the corridors of heaven. In the corridors of heaven, victory, 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 victory. For angels are being released right now. Angels are being dispatched right now. Hamanda aka ata raka teda baka sanda ata ambo osa kata rite eke banda ata rike didi ashata. For angels have even been dispatched from Africa right now. Africa right now. Africa right now. From Africa right now. They're coming here. They're coming here. In the name of Jesus. From South America. They're coming here. They're coming here. They're coming here. They're coming here. From Africa. From South America. Angelic forces. Angelic reinforcement. Angelic reinforcement. Angelic reinforcement. Pika hata anda ata. Ora bata rata ande eke eke manda rasata. For I hear the sound of victory. 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 I hear the sound of victory.
Oh.
What is Karen the White Witch? Say something, dude. Cleo Bliss.
Did you have to play the whole sermon?
She learned that from black folks. So there's that.
Why Paula White is a plumber? Because she's full of crap. She's so full of crap. I mean,
yeah, she was, but we sure did give her a platform, didn't we?
Well, not me. Look, don't. Who's we? Well, I would have gave her.
Black folks gave Paula White her platform,
and this is relevant.
All that she learned from black folks.
This is relevant because it's another example of us being played. Because Paula White knows she's full of crap. It ain't like she don't know. She knows she's manipulating black people. She knows that she learned her cadences and her drama from black people, and she's playing black people, and it has created a very opulent life off of her playing of black people. And she knows it. We don't know it, but she knows it. And it goes back to Biden playing us, Trump playing. That's why I say that's why we're so good at sports. People play us so much.
Did y'all see one of the black women, 8%, catching the Holy Ghost?
I saw her catch the holy hypnosis. I saw her.
Well, let me give y'all a little bit of history on Paula White. Well, she came down and got a start down in Florida, in Tampa. I think the church.
That's where you went wrong.
Okay.
Well, let me tell you something. Back, there was a black pastor named Pastor Zachary Timms who died untimely and young up in New York. He was from Orlando, but he died up in New York City under some very mysterious circumstances. His wife was also a minister. Her name is Pastor Reva Timms. When he died, there was a big shuffle to find a new pastor for the church. His wife was the most logical person up to take over the church, Reva Timms. She knew the people. She was from the area, blah, blah, blah. And she also was like a host on the gospel music morning show. Paula White came in, and the black people who were like on the board of the church, they pretty much were enamored with, the blonde hair, blue eyed, and brought her in and gave her that black church to rule over. And that's like her, that's her base. That's why you see black people up in that dude. But like Bliss said, that's something we created, that monster. That she got everything she learned from black people, and we gave her the go ahead. We gave her the invitation into the temple of all places.
Janae Washington said Florida is the hell spelled backwards.
Y'all don't do it. Stop.
At
least we got good water down there, Florida water.
But it's something in that water, though. It's something in the water,
clearly.
But they said, can we cancel her, please? I beg you. Well, listen, we're going to have to cancel the whole institution.
That's right.
That part.
I was telling Duke earlier that a brother named Rance Allen just died. Yeah. And I discovered he's to me an exceptional gospel singer. And I wasn't really a follower of his, but I heard his voice once and I was very moved by his voice. Not the mythological stuff behind it, but the man's voice. And I've been like wrapped up in him since he died, because I was mourning him because I liked his spirit. But what I was bothered by was all the people running around doing what that black woman that you talked about, Duke, was doing. Because even though spirit is real, and that can be called God, if you will, this whole church stuff is about as real as Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and, the Easter bunny who lays eggs, Easter bunny that lays eggs, chocolate eggs at that. They don't exist. And they're all involved and got choirs who all have diabetes, half of them. And it's just a mess. And I had to watch all that to listen to this brother sing, who died probably because he might have had diabetes, because he was someone who was challenged physically because of diet. But we've got some work to do. And we have all these things that keeps us in a trance, that keeps us at risk for the likes of Paula White and Joe Biden and all these other people. But we have somebody who's joined us here, it seems.
And he looks kind of familiar, but I don't quite know if I recognize that brother.
What's going on, family? How y'all doing? I was like, I gotta get in here somehow. Where to begin? Y'all touched on good seeing everybody. Y'all touched on so many things, but what the Hakuna Matata was that that we just saw?
if there was a word for Matata Acuna, that would be all
Right.
back. We got everything
Right.
back for that one.
Yeah, I think she was a channeling Acuna. But anyway, this is, I don't know where to begin. It's just interesting in terms of what's happening here. One thing that I think hasn't really been talked about enough is the whole economics of Trump. There are a lot of folks who feel as though their economic interests somehow were buoyed, by him, or can be buoyed here, and that's kind of across the board. But it's obviously it's highly manipulative. He wrote a check, he signed his name on a check. He made folks think that those tax breaks that were signed on were permanent. Those are temporary things. Well, they're permanent for the upper class, but only temporary for folks in the lower class. But it's just highly smoke and mirrors and manipulative. And I think a lot of people bought into it. This whole economics that I'm going to do better, underneath his administration, if you will.
Yeah, that's
I think.
true.
Yeah, it's still in the lore. And I mean, that was also part of Trump's quote unquote appeal in the last election year, where America was not only a racist, but they saw a racist businessman, someone who could commodify and put forth more funds, allegedly, because he's a billionaire. He recovered from bankruptcy twice. This is a man who's known for making money. And the fear has been how people have been using anyone who votes for Trump as a way to make analysis about the character of those individuals. And there's been a huge focus on Black men who vote for Trump, saying that, they want access to power or the money, as opposed to them actually validating his politics. But the truth is, throughout the entire Trump campaign, there's been attacks to find out what is going on with his economic status. Like, there's many people who just made conclusive arguments that, for better or worse, this man is still essentially broke. And he's using American money, the American taxpaying money, in order to do a lot of these things, especially when he was sued for allegedly harassing women and sexually assaulting them. He's using his position as president in order to cover those particular charges. Like, this is a man who knows how to use money, even if he's not the one that owns it.
Well, yeah, and not only is him being in that position, covering up, some of his economic lies, is also his safety net, because, on the other side of him leaving that position, he knows that there may be, a jail sentence waiting, because the sister in New York is ready to, to clamp down on him, not just for the taxes, but for all the other business malfeasance that he's been engaged in. So, the whole narrative of him, a lot of people bought into the smoke and the mirrors, the carnival barker nature of who he is, the lies, the deception. But he knows that once he doesn't have the kind of the covering of that position, that he's going to be in a whole world. So he's a caged animal, and a cornered animal, desperate. So he's going to do everything under the sun, and there's no holds barred in terms of what he will do and the lengths that he will go to, because he knows that on the other side of him not having the covering of the presidency, he's gonna be facing quite a bit of legal and threats to his freedom type of activity, type of kind of consequences, if you will.
But not that I care at all about Trump. Whatever happens to him, so what? But it is important to understand that, along with what you're saying, is that he has never really lost much. And let me finish, because people keep talking about his bankruptcies.
Right.
He was saved by the bankruptcies. So that's why I say he's never really lost much. He went into the court system and the bankruptcy option and took advantage of it as many times as he could. And he got back on top again in terms of being able to operate and reach for more money. He did something very unusual before all of our eyes. He got to the highest pinnacle in this country in terms of its bureaucracy. And now he's going to lose it. And everything you just got finished saying, Ken, is true. And he's losing. I mean, going to be interesting to watch to see how he implodes and the rest of his family, because he's gone from talk show, what do you call them shows that he was on?
Reality show.
A major reality show, to become, famous president of the United States, and he's getting ready to lose everything.
But barring him going to jail, he has secured money for the rest of his life just by ascending to presidency. So that's something that other people, just got to remember, that when you reach that position, you are covered for the rest of your life.
But only up to a little less than $200,000 a year, though. Mm-hmm. It ain't millions, and $200,000 a year is chump change compared to what Donald Trump is used to. But there's another component here, real quickly, if you don't mind, Kashama, that we haven't talked about. One of the things that Ice Cube said about the Democratic Party is that a lot of Black people have said about the Democratic Party, who wind up becoming Republicans or not voting, is that the Democratic Party has taken us for granted, which is true. As a matter of fact, when Obama ran for president, he used a term that I'm sure Kashama knows all about. He paid them no mind. He's heard that term before. He paid Black people no mind. I'm talking about Obama, when he just paid attention to white folks because he knew I got them. And typically, that's how all Democratic presidents have been. But the reason that Biden had to come up with the fried chicken plan was, I think, to counter the likes of the contract with America that Ice Cube already had, and because he's being pressured by Black people who he's working strategically to help him become president this time, by hook or by crook. But my point in all this, that I hope doesn't get lost, is the deflection of all criticisms of the Democratic Party is not helping Black people. And that's part of why they jumped on Ice-T, because Ice-T did not say, I'm a president. I like Donald. Matter of fact, he said he wasn't a supporter of Donald Trump, and he didn't even like Donald Trump. But he also said the Democratic Party was taking us for granted, which is true, and that helped to get him marginalized.
Yeah, and I think just piggybacking on what you all talked about earlier, his plan was highly detailed and it was highly specific in terms of percentages, tying any activities to the percentage of people of African descent, not people of color, this whole dubious term that has no meaning really, but it was like, no, specifically tying economic activity, kind of business contracts, so on and so forth, to certain, percentages of the wealth that's generated in various different industries, and it had to be, specifically tied to, folks who could prove that they were, not just some subgroup that wanted to latch on to, the whole white woman thing, how white women basically benefited more from affirmative action than anything else. So this kind of would counter that kind of outcome. You wouldn't have other people benefiting from it, something that was meant for us.
Right. And he had a strong, powerful counter white supremacy and counter police brutality plan in that contract. He also talked about reparations, inspired by Claude Anderson, in very clear, powerful ways that were dismissed. And now you got Saturday Night Live with a brother who's married to a white dude, by the way. Excuse me, a white woman. Wrong group. A brother married to a white woman. Whatever his name is. Joining the anti-Ice Cube scenario.
And when I heard Ice Cube interview, he also invited, it was like, this is a living document. I think I remember him saying that on countless occasions. This is something that we can make better. I'm not presenting myself as the person who has all the answers, but I want to, I've already put a foundation here with certain people who are intelligent and smart, but we want to make it smarter. So come to the table with ideas of how we can make this better and make it more effective in terms of being the transformative and transformational type of plan that will really impact the community.
In case I lost anybody in my last comment, I was talking about Kenan. What's his name?
Thompson. Kenan Butter Biscuits Thompson.
Right, exactly. I was talking about Kenan being the one who's married to a white woman who's sitting here trying to make a mock of a brother who's married to a sister who's about Black people. That's what. So in case I confuse y'all with my confusing comment.
No, I think everybody should have caught that. But no, I do want to thank you, brother KMJ, for joining us. Yeah, I want to thank you for joining us. We're actually going to be wrapping up in about 1 minute. So Bliss, I think you had something to say, and then if we can actually go around the panel and get all of our co-hosts to give our summary or our summation or last words. Bliss, are you frozen?
No, anybody. Okay. Nobody's frozen.
That's me on my end, y'all. I got to straighten some things out. This is not normal for me.
A little bit, yeah. Yeah, it's a little frozen. Can you hear me now?
We just got some news from our producer. It's actually the software.
It's the software.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we hear you, Bliss.
Yeah, just fine.
Okay.
Were you getting ready to say something, Bliss?
I'm all those points are important, and I think the most important point about Ice Cube is that plan is that it was done by scholars. He didn't do it by himself. He got the help of several scholars. Open to
sorry, community. Bliss is having some software challenge. The white man doing it, most likely. You know how they are. I'm almost kidding, but whatever you just got finished saying, Bliss, we didn't hear you because you froze on.
Okay. Okay. Again, I was going to say just very quickly, the important part about the Ice Cube's plan is that it has been open. He has been open to suggestions. He has said it from the first time he posted it. There's been allowances. No one, women, any other group of Black Americans who wanted to be a part of that conversation, who wanted to add and tweak, he offered that. It was open. Also, again, I just wanted to say, in case it wasn't heard, he got scholars. He got the best of the best to sit at a table with him and to draft that contract. So anybody who has a problem with it has a problem because they want to. And most importantly, it's about economics, because in this country, what we did not say here is after our lovely Democratic president, Black people in terms of wealth lost wealth in those 8 years that we had our Democratic president. We lost wealth in terms of home ownership. We cannot afford to do that this go round. So,
Well, that. I just want to add, this is also, this was inspired by Cleo's comment, but just also building off of what you said, Bliss. So anyone that knows, I'm a poet and author, and I have been working on some new work for this year. And I just want to go over something that I have been working on. And I'm not going to do the whole thing clearly. If you would like to know more of my work, just find me. But I start off by saying that how October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And I talk about how often that shows up in our families and in our communities about dealing with the abuses and the bruises that we have to go home to at the end of the day. And I talk about how my whole family is victims of DV, and DV is the way that the CDC talks about domestic violence in our communities. But I go on to say that my whole family is victims of DV, democratic voting, for democratic voting. Domestic violence is a voting booth for what is a candidate, but a lover who does not love us and lies about what they say they going to do. For Black bodies, what is the ballot, but indeed a bullet. And so I want us to think about, the poem goes on more into talking about, it don't matter who you vote for. You have to have actual plans in what you want from these particular candidates. These candidates are going to lie to you. These candidates are going to abuse you. And we have been dealing with this abuse for up 10 years in our communities. And specifically when it comes to the Democratic Party, there's this talk, and this is in the poem too, haha, look at me. We are constantly talking about the elephant in the room, but ignoring the jackass. And we have to get to the bottom of this as a community.
As you all know, a lot of people, or most people, see this broadcast afterwards, even though we have a good crowd of several hundred who watch it live, but most people see it later. And to sisters and brothers who want to join the narrative, who see this, and those who are leaning on consideration of being a feminist or caught up in that alleged women support paradigm, I think it's important for us to understand that when people, including Ice Cube, says it's a contract for Black America, don't be reading and stuff that he didn't say. He didn't say a contract for Black Americans who have penises and who without vaginas. He didn't say that. Everybody's when it's Black History Month, it's not Black Men's History Month, it's Black People's History Month. So we get caught up. And even I've gone to do speaking engagements someplace and somebody LGBTQ accused me in the middle of my talk. Well, you left somebody out, and I had to let them know, but you look Black to me. I did not leave you out. I said it was a Black discussion. And so we have to stop allowing ourselves to fall into the agendas external to our community to separate us, to have us at each other's throat. I don't like to use white people as an example of something Black people should do, but sometimes it's appropriate because our capacity to do this has been interrupted by them. And what I'm talking about, and you've heard me mention this before, that for Trump to become president, white, lesbians, I know some personally who are feminists even, and gays and all kinds of people came together to make sure that to counter the footprint of Barack Obama as a Black person, that a white, crazy, no secretly white people like Joe Biden, secretly, passively aggressive white, but straight up white people, would be no doubt white, like Trump, become president. They came together. Even though Trump was grabbing pussies, most people who voted for him were white women, and he was talking about their pussies because they want power. I'm talking about the white women. So we need to stop allowing ourselves to be fragmented by these white, gay, feminist, and LGBTQ influenced tendencies that think or accuse Black people who say Black of not including you if you're Black. We got to stop doing that. And that's one of the things that happened to Ice Cube, where some women were saying, well, he didn't bring up women's issues. He brought up Black issues. And everything he said, without exception, would benefit women as well as men, if indeed it wasn't railroaded by white supremacy of fried chicken plans and the Democratic Party's white supremacist agenda to use Black people so they could become president, while Trump did whatever the hell he did. We just got to reconsider some things, people. We got to have a Black perspective instead of a white perspective couched in an allegation for social justice.
I want us to look at elections for what they truly are, which is a power grab, which is this country coming together every 2 to 4 years to decide on who has power and who controls and distributes resources without going to physical war. That's what elections are. It's an alternative to war. The ballot is the alternative to the bullet. And I want us to start looking at that way and to start working for power and consolidating power year round and outside of election seasons, so that when election time comes up, we're not standing around looking crazy, saying crazy stuff like lesser of two evils and getting mad at Black people for doing common sense things like writing down a tangible proposal, crazy stuff. So I want us to look at elections in a whole new light than what it has been promoted in our communities and in our conversations around elections. But with that being said, this has been another Melanated Solutions Media broadcast. This was a Super Black Election Breakdown. I'm so glad that we had Sister Bliss with us for the first time ever, and not the last time, of course. Myself, Kashama, Duke, and Cleo. Remember to catch us on Facebook and YouTube. You can also catch our individual handles as well. I'm sure it's out there somewhere.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
All right.